It's never a good thing to start off muted, is it? Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to a conversation with Metrolinx about the Ontario Line project, focusing today on the recently released Draft Environmental Impact Assessment Report, or EIAR for short. My name is Joseph Thornley. I'm the CEO of 76 Engage, Metrolinx's public engagement partner for virtual consultation. It's my pleasure to be the moderator for this evening's event, and as moderator, I'll work to keep the event on time, ensure your questions are answered as fully as possible, and make sure as many questions are answered as possible. One important note, this event is being closed captioned. So if you require closed captioning, simply move your cursor to the bottom of the video screen, look for the CC and click on the CC icon, and you will turn on closed captioning. At the outset of tonight's event, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on traditional territory of Indigenous peoples, including many of us have come here as settlers and immigrants in this generation or generations past. Metrolinx declares its commitment to building meaningful relationships with Indigenous peoples. We acknowledge the historic and continued impacts of colonization and the need to work toward meaningful reconciliation with the original caretakers of this land. We acknowledge that Metrolinx operates on lands covered by 20 treaties, and that we have a responsibility to recognize and value the rights of Indigenous peoples and nations and conduct business in a manner that is built on a foundation of trust, respect, and collaboration. Also, as we get underway, let's talk about safety for just a second. Safety is very important to an organization like Metrolinx, and our eyesight is very much a part of that. Metrolinx recommends that we use the 20-20-20 rule to prevent digital eye strain as we're looking at our screens all day long. That means take a break from your screen every 20 minutes for 20 seconds while looking 20 feet away. Try it. It actually does work. Now, this evening's event is part of a series of 4 virtual open houses that Metrolinx is holding for the Ontario Line EIAR. Tonight's session is focused on the stations from the Science Centre down to Gerrard. If you have questions about other parts of the Ontario Line from Gerrard to Exhibition, please register to participate in the next 2 sessions that are coming up on March 1 or March 3. And you can find a live meetings button at the top of the window that you're looking at now, above the video window, and you can go there and you'll see the registration for those events. Tonight's event is scheduled to last until about 8 p.m. We'll start with a brief presentation, and then we'll take as many questions as possible. We'll start the questions by looking at some of the most voted for questions that have been submitted in writing prior to the meeting. And you might just want to take a minute to look at the questions that have been submitted and vote for the ones that you'd most like to have answered live. And don't worry, if you've got a question, you've asked it, and it's not got enough votes to be answered live tonight, Metrolinx will be going through the questions and they'll be answering all of the topic areas to make sure that you will be responded to. After we finished the written questions, we've got a call-in option. Right under the video screen, you'll see a yellow Join Zoom button. You don't need to do that after the presentation is over. If you just click the Join Zoom button, you can go into the Zoom room where Norando and Caitlin are waiting for you. And at the appropriate time, they'll let you know that you can unmute your mic and you can ask your question live to the panel. We'd ask that you try and keep your question relatively brief. The panel will be as brief as they can, and we'll get through as many questions as we are able to in the 90 minutes between now and 8 p.m. Again, if you've just joined us, the event is being closed captioned, and you can simply click on the CC at the bottom of your video window in order to turn on closed captioning. So let me introduce our panel of presenters and question answers tonight. Malcolm Mackay is the program sponsor for the Ontario Line project. With him is James Francis, a senior manager on the environmental programs and assessment team. Jesse Pakala is a program manager on the environmental programs and assessment team. And also with us is Vicki Wong, the director of property acquisitions. And finally, bringing up the anchoring the team is Richard Tucker, the vice president of subway project delivery for the Ontario Line. Welcome, Malcolm, James, Jesse, Vicki, and Richard. Malcolm, would you like to start off the presentation, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Joseph. If we can go to the next slide. So just the next few slides are a recap of what the Ontario Line is and the area that we're talking about this evening. First off, the Ontario Line is a 15.6 kilometer long new subway that's running from Exhibition to the Ontario Science Centre. It has 15 stations with a design frequency of up to 90 seconds in the AM peak periods and is expected to handle 88,000 daily boardings. The subway also has 40 connections to other transit, including 2 at line 1, 1 at line 2, and 2 to the existing GO train network. We're expecting that this alignment will bring over 250,000 people within walking distance of the new subway. Next slide. Starting at the north end, we have Science Centre Station. We're expecting a peak hour ridership through here of 5,800 people. It's positioned on the northeast corner of Don Mills and Eglinton Avenue, so that in the future, if it ever is expanded, it can easily go further north. Next slide. The next station going south is Flemington Park Station. It's between St. Denis and Gateway on the west side of Don Mills Road. We're expecting ridership here in the AM peak period of over 2,800 boardings. Next slide. As we come south and go across the Don Valley, we now come into the Thorncliffe Park area where we have a station on the north side of Overlea Boulevard. This is also the location of the maintenance and storage facility for the Ontario Line. Next slide. As we go further south, we go back across the Don Valley and we come into an area called the Minton Place Portal. This is where the subway line will go underground and continue south towards Cosburn Station. Next slide. Cosburn Station is going to have over 2,600 passengers through the AM peak hour, and it is located on the west side of Cape Avenue. We're actually building this station out of the roadway in order to minimize the impact, the construction impact to the roads, the vehicles, and the surface transportation network. Next slide. As we head further south, we have Pape Station, which is one of the most important stations on the alignment. It is the interchange station with Line 2, where we will get the most benefit to our Line 1 ridership reduction at the very important Young Bloor Station. So that is the relief the congestion relief that the Ontario Line will bring for Line 1. At Pape, we're expecting over 10,000 people in the AM peak hour to be transferring through this and arriving through this station. As we head further south, next slide, we come to the Gerrard Portal. This is where the Ontario Line will come out of the ground and be above grade through the joint corridor south of here. And this is the limit of tonight's presentation material. Next slide. So the project timeline, we've been in market for over a year now for our South Civils, Tunnels and Stations contract, as well as our Rolling Stock Systems Operation and Maintenance contract. We're expecting those to be awarded this year with construction beginning in 2023. Simultaneously, we will be tendering our North civils, stations, and tunnels contract, and we're expecting construction for that to begin in late 24. We currently have our environmental impact assessment report out for review, and James will be talking about that in great detail shortly. Next slide. I'll pass it over to James.
Great, thanks very much, Malcolm. So our environmental assessment work for Ontario Line, it's been well underway for the past few years. And for this work, we're following a project-specific environmental assessment regulation. And this regulation and the process is similar to the transit project assessment process, which is the typical environmental assessment process for transit projects, and that it requires study of the existing environment, consultation with interested parties, and identification of mitigation to avoid or reduce impacts of the project on the existing environment. One way that the Ontario Line environmental assessment process differs from the typical environmental assessment process for transit projects in that it's phased. So we completed the first phase of the environmental assessment, looking at existing conditions, back in 2020, when we published the Environmental Conditions Report. This report collected baseline information about all the typical environmental disciplines or topics that we look at in a transit environmental assessment, like archaeology, cultural heritage, noise and vibration, the natural environment, socioeconomics, air quality, traffic, and soil and groundwater. The second phase of the Ontario Line environmental assessment process is early works reporting. And this reporting builds on the environmental conditions report with standalone impact assessments for portions of the Ontario Line that are proceeding to implementation ahead of our main works. So we completed 5 early works reports through the end of last year. And this is for works at Exhibition Station, Corktown Station, at the Lower Don Bridge and Don Yard, at East Harbour Station, and for the Lakeshore East Joint Corridor. And each of these reports has now been approved by the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks. So we're now in the final phase of the Ontario Line environmental assessment process with, as Malcolm mentioned, our draft environmental impact assessment report, which we released for public review and comment on February 7th. And the environmental impact assessment report, it looks at potential impacts of the project, of the overall project on the existing environment during both project construction and project operation, and it prescribes mitigation to avoid or reduce these impacts, as well as monitoring activities, and those monitoring activities are to confirm or verify mitigation effectiveness and inform any adaptive management that may be needed. Next slide, please. So this slide, it shows the next steps for the environmental impact assessment report. So we issued the notice of draft environmental impact assessment report on February 7th, and that began a public review period which extends through March 9th. So during this review period, we're hosting virtual open house events like this one, and this is to share key findings of the report, to encourage review and comment on the draft environmental impact assessment report, and to hear your feedback. So we'll be responding to all the comments that we receive during this time frame and updating the environmental impact assessment report to reflect all the feedback that we do receive. And we're required by the Ontario Line environmental assessment regulation to issue a final environmental impact assessment report no later than 65 days after we've issued the draft. So once that final report is published, that triggers a period that's up to 35 days long, during which the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks can review the document. And then following that minister's review period, Metrolinx will issue a statement of completion, and that statement formally concludes the environmental assessment process. Next slide, please. So the environmental impact assessment report is quite extensive. It's several thousand pages in length, and that full report and all of its appendices is available on our website for review. We also have environmental topic-specific summary pages on our website, which are intended to help facilitate review. So for tonight's virtual open house, we wanted to provide an overview of key findings and commitments for each environmental topic. And I'll start with construction noise and vibration, which is one of the topics we hear a fair amount of interest in. And I'd like to share how Metrolinx takes a proactive approach to comprehensively managing noise and vibration from construction activities. So we model construction noise and vibration in the environmental impact assessment report using conservative assumptions. And that's given the current phase of design that we're at. And these assumptions include simultaneous use of construction equipment at full power throughout the entire project footprint or area in which we'll be building. And our assessment results show that our construction activities will require mitigation. That mitigation might include phasing or coordinating our timing of specific construction activities, implementing construction site hoarding that's effective as a noise barrier, and using equipment on lower power settings So the assessment included in the environmental impact assessment report, it's only our first phase of work in this area. And we spell out and we commit to these next steps in the report. And this includes completion of site-specific construction noise and vibration management plans by our contractor once they're on board and have selected means and methods. Those management plans are then reviewed and approved by Metrolinx before any construction work begins. We will also be continuously monitoring noise and vibration at all of the construction sites throughout construction to make sure that construction is being effectively managed from a noise and vibration perspective, and any additional mitigation is brought into play as may be needed. And the images on this slide do show construction noise monitor and as well as a construction vibration monitor, examples of equipment we will be using once we're into construction. We'll also have a fully accessible phone line throughout construction and a responsive complaints process if any issues do arise. Next slide, please. So we also model noise and vibration from Ontario Line project operations in the environmental impact assessment report, and that's to identify where mitigation is needed and most effective. So for the tunnel portions of the project, we've identified that vibration isolation to separate the subway tracks on which the trains will travel from the tunnel in which the tracks will be situated is needed to keep noise and vibration below perceptible levels. In some locations, we're recommending a rubber system under the tracks, and in other locations, we're recommending a spring system under the tracks. And each of these systems will effectively limit transfer vibration from those moving trains to the tunnel. And that will make sure that noise and vibration are below perceptible levels at all of the structures that are traveling. On the elevated guideway, so where the Ontario Line is above ground, since the Ontario Line trains will be quiet and electric and automated, the sounds of train movements will integrate well into the existing ambient noise environment. In most cases near the elevated guideway, or in most locations near the elevated guideway, existing road traffic noise is louder than Ontario Line trains, and mitigation like noise barriers isn't warranted or needed to meet regulatory limits. That said, we are committed to installing noise barriers along Overley Boulevard between Millwood Road and Thorncliffe Park Drive, as well as at the maintenance and storage facility. And this will reduce noise levels below applicable limits. We're committed to ongoing engagement on design of these noise walls, and that's to make sure that their look and feel integrates well with the surrounding neighborhood as planning and design progress. We do know that it can be challenging to conceptualize future noise levels. So we're currently working to update our immersive sound demonstration, which is currently on our website and covers locations near the joint corridor. We're updating that immersive sound demonstration to include locations for this segment of the project between the Ontario Science Centre and Gerrard Station. And this sound demonstration, like our sound demonstration for the joint corridor, it will present both existing noise levels with corresponding video taken at locations near the segment of Ontario Line, as well as future modeled noise levels accompanied by three-dimensional animations or renderings of Ontario Line operations. So an example of one of the future modeled scenarios is shown on this slide and depicts a conceptual noise barrier on the elevated guideway along Overley Boulevard. I wanted to just add a caveat here. The image that's shown on the slide, it's for illustrative purposes only, and in no way reflects the ultimate design of the landscaping near the elevated guideway. We will be embarking on a landscape design process that will be informed by public input on these project elements as we continue planning. Other locations featured in the immersive sound demonstration include a basement living space above subway tunnels near Pape Station, Minton Place, Bannigan Drive, and that's adjacent to the future maintenance and storage facility, at the Rivera Leaside Retirement Home on William Morgan Drive, and at the Ontario Science Centre. So we're just about to launch this updated immersive sound demonstration, and I'd encourage signing up for our social media channels, including Facebook and Twitter, or signing up for our e-newsletter, where we will be promoting the launch of the updated immersive sound demo. You know, I think it's a really neat tool. It allows you to experience both the current and the future sand levels. And with that, next slide, please. So we're very aware of the cultural heritage resources along the route of the Ontario line, and we're working to avoid impacts to heritage properties wherever we can, while still accommodating the best transit solution. So the images on this slide depict the Ontario Science Centre, which is a known provincially significant heritage property that we do need to traverse, but where we're able to avoid any impacts to the building itself, as well as remains of the Middle Mill, which is one of 3 historic paper mills located in the Don Valley near Minton Place. The mill buildings themselves were demolished in the 1990s, and the lime kiln, the remains of the lime kiln that are shown on the image at lower left, as well as a mill race connecting to the Don River, are the only known remaining heritage features. We do need to relocate utilities in the valley near the Middle Mill to accommodate Ontario Line, and we're planning this utility relocation to avoid any direct impacts on the remaining heritage features here. And so these are only 2 of many heritage resources in this area of the study area for Ontario Line. So the EIAR commits to mitigation for impacts at each of these potentially affected heritage properties. And where heritage impacts are unavoidable, we're continuing to work closely with the city's heritage planning staff and staff at our regulator, which is the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Cultural Industries. And we're working with them on plans to document and salvage heritage attributes, on plans to commemorate and interpret heritage sites, and on plans to design nearby Ontario Line infrastructure in compatible and sympathetic ways. And then wherever heritage properties are near construction zones for Ontario Line, we'll be monitoring vibration at those sites throughout construction, and that's to make sure that vibration levels don't exceed thresholds that are protective of sensitive heritage structures. Next slide, please. In terms of archaeology, most of the study area between Gerrard and Science Centre stations has been previously cleared of archaeological potential, and that's due to past disturbance. As well, there are no known archaeological sites in this portion of the study area. So we will be completing additional archaeological assessments this spring and seeking archaeological clearance for all construction areas prior to construction. Next slide, please. So we also look at socioeconomic and land use impacts in the Environmental Impact Assessment Report. And in terms of mitigation, we commit to maintaining access to businesses, parking spaces, and recreational spaces throughout construction, and engaging with the city and local communities on public realm elements like look and feel of future stations and public space under the elevated guideway as design progresses. Next slide, please. The EIAR also assesses impacts to traffic and transportation as a result of both project construction and operation. To maintain traffic flow, we commit to a road under rail grade separation of Beth Nielsen Drive, uninterrupted operation of the bus station at Pape Station and the future bus station at Science Centre Station, and staged construction of the crossover between the tunnels under Pape Avenue near Salmon Avenue. Other mitigation that we've committed to includes maintaining access to businesses and loading docks, as well as safety routes for pedestrians and cyclists wherever those may be required. I'd like to turn it over to my colleague Jesse now to take us through the findings of the remaining environmental topics that we've assessed in the EIAR.
Thanks, James. Next slide, please. Natural environment, we assess natural areas like significant woodlands and wetlands, fish and wildlife habitat, and species at risk. Our subject matter experts first reviewed existing information from the Environmental Conditions Report and also from agencies like the Toronto Region Conservation Authority and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada. We then supplemented this available information by completing field surveys of plant communities and wildlife habitat, particularly in the Millwood Road and Walmsley Brook areas. Our team then overlaid project designs within the study area to identify any potential effects. We recognize that green space and parklands are limited resources in the city, and with this in mind, we are working to refine our designs to minimize tree removals and protect trees wherever we can. That being said, the project will need to remove some trees in order to accommodate safe work zones during construction and to allow for new infrastructure. Where tree removals are required, we will take a surgical approach, protecting surrounding trees with barriers and performing removals outside of sensitive timing windows for wildlife as much as possible. We will compensate for all tree removals in accordance with city permitting requirements and following Metrolinx vegetation guidelines, ensuring a higher degree of compensation for natural areas and planting many more trees than we remove. We are also working with the City of Toronto and Toronto Region Conservation Authority to identify local compensation opportunities and tree planting locations to help offset any required removals and contribute to ecosystem revitalization in the Don Valley. Next slide. We also assess the aquatic environment within the Environmental Impact Assessment Report, recognizing that construction and operation of the project will take place over the Don River. The project crosses the Don River and its tributaries at 3 locations in the north, near Millwood Road in the Don Valley Parkway, at Walmsley Brook near the maintenance facility, and at the West Don River closer to the Science Center. We are committed to protecting the integrity of these watercourses during construction and operation of the Ontario Line. Our commitments to protecting the Don River will include establishing and maintaining construction setbacks from the watercourse, performing in-water works within applicable timing windows to avoid impacts to fish and their habitat, and this is in order to install tracks into the maintenance and storage facility at Walmsley Brook. And also installing erosion sediment control measures beforehand and regularly inspecting these measures throughout construction to prevent sediment runoff. Lastly, we will continue to work with the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority to incorporate flood protection measures as we advance planning and designs for works in these areas. Next slide, please. Existing soil and groundwater conditions were assessed using available information to identify potential effects, mitigation measures, and monitoring activities during construction and operations. Further geotechnical and due diligence investigations ahead of construction will confirm existing conditions and also inform project designs to ensure potential impacts to soil and groundwater are avoided or mitigated. We commit to proper handling and management of soil and groundwater during construction in accordance with all regulatory requirements and approvals. This includes the new excess soil regulation, as well as requirements pertaining to contaminated soils and dewatering. Once construction is complete, we do not anticipate any long-term impacts during operations of the Ontario. Next slide. We assess potential impacts to air quality for both construction and operations as part of the Environmental Impact Assessment Report. The Ontario Line features electric trains that will improve local air quality by reducing direct emissions and taking cars off the road. Potential operational impacts on air quality are expected to be minimal and mitigated by implementing an air quality management plan for the maintenance and storage facility and at stations. Potential impacts during construction will be avoided through active monitoring and mitigation, including the use of dust suppressants, covering of stockpiles, using wind screening, and the implementation of proper excess soils and materials handling and equipment washing procedures. Next slide, please. As many of you are already aware, the draft Environmental Impact Assessment Report is now posted on our webpage for review and input until March 9th, after which public inputs will be reviewed and addressed ahead of publication of the final EIAR in April 2022. Public engagement for the Ontario Line Environmental Impact Assessment Report will continue to take place over the coming weeks, including virtual open houses next week on March 1st and 3rd, which will outline the project from Gerrard Station to Exhibition Station. And with that, I'll now hand the mic over to Vicky, who will provide further details on our property requirements for the project. Vicky?
Thanks so much, Jesse. The next 2 slides relate to our notification to property owners. If property is needed for the project, owners will receive a letter, and there are different ways that properties can be impacted. The project may need some or all of the site permanently, such as for the construction of a station, or the need may be underground only, such as for the construction of the subway tunnel or to support that subway tunnel. The permanent need may be an easement, which relates to needing a partial interest or access only to lands, as opposed to full ownership of the property. Sometimes Metrolinx may have a temporary need to use the land for a fixed time, and after that construction is completed, the lands will be restored to the same condition or better. Next slide, please. Whether your property is impacted permanently or temporarily, or part or all of it, receipt of a letter is just the beginning. We would like to meet and speak with you directly to explain details such as how much of the property is needed, why, what to expect in terms of timelines, and answering your questions. We want to ensure that you have as much information and support as possible. We would like to negotiate directly with owners to reach agreement, which includes compensation. Compensation for all properties impacted, whether or not it's a portion of it, such as that permanent underground easement, or in its entirety, it's based on the fair market value of the property. This is estimated by accredited third-party appraisers who will analyze each property on a case-by-case scenario. And we'd be happy to explain this analysis to you when we speak. Owners also have a chance to have their own appraisal reports completed as well at Metrolinx's expense. So if you received a letter, please do reach out to us through the Metrolinx contact name on that letter so we can speak more specifically to you about your property. And regardless of whether or not, you've received one, if you have any questions about your property, please do not hesitate to reach out to us, being the property team at ontarioline@metrolinx.com or 416-202-5150. Thanks. I'll pass the presentation over to Richard now.
Great, Vicki, thanks very much. So let's talk a little bit about what to expect in 2022 in your neighborhood. So next slide, please. So we have three groups of work that we're intending to carry out in 2022 in the area. On the west, starting in the winter of 2022, we'll be doing ongoing surveys and investigation in the West Don Crossing area. There'll be some tree protection and some tree removals that in preparation for the geotechnical investigations that we need to undertake for the various foundations and soil stability work in the area. Don Valley, spring and summer of 2022, we continue that work in the Don Valley, Walmsley Brook, and West Don Crossing area, and start with some archaeological work to start clearing that area of any archaeological resources that may exist there, identifying and catalog them. And then in the fall and late winter of 2022, we're looking at the Don Valley, Walmsley Brook, and West Don Crossing areas. And again, we'll be moving back into tree protection and removals. There will be some slope and soil stabilization work, further geotechnical investigations, as well as the start of some sanitary sewer relocations that are necessary for some of the foundations and structures. And with that, next slide. And I think it's back to Malcolm.
Thank you, Richard. Next slide. So, we are very thankful for your input, and we'd like to be able to receive that. There's an email location, ontarioline@metrolinx.com, or alternatively, you can call us at 416-202-5100. And if you're interested in the Ontario Line, we have a website set up, metrolinx.com/Ontario Line, where all of our virtual events are posted and the latest Ontario Line news is kept up to date, or you can sign up for our e-newsletter. Now we're wrapping up the presentation part of the presentation tonight, and we'll pass it over back to Joseph. Joseph?
Thank you very much, and thank you to the whole team for the presentation. That was a lot of material, which you covered in a good period of time. So we have an hour for questions and answers. And I want to get into that right away. Just before I do, though, I just want to recognize that we're joined tonight as well by Julie DeBruzen, who is the MP for Toronto Danforth. So welcome and thank you for your interest in joining us. Now, the first set of questions relate to the maintenance and storage facility. And I'm going to go through them all because there are several questions, but they have really been upvoted during the meeting and in the run-up to the meeting tonight. So it's clear that people who are not only interested in it, but are here right now. So for everyone else, we'll get to a lot of other questions, but let's talk about the MSF. And let's start off with, it's a fairly long question that I won't read all together. I know, Malcolm, you're going to handle this and that you've read the full set of information. But let me get to the meat of the question, which is really in the last paragraph. And the the question, basically, the premise is that the maintenance and storage facility siting in Thorncliffe doesn't meet policy planning criteria. And the questioner says, it's clear from the demographics of the Thorncliffe area that the MSF site will be hindering the positive growth of the community, and as a result, also fails critical objectives of the guiding planning policies Metrolinx must follow. What the Thorncliffe area needs is a transit-oriented community to provide the needed affordable housing and amenities around the proposed subway station, not an MSF site that strips them of this possibility. All the maps provided show ample space on the other side of the CP rail corridor in Leaside Business Park, which is already slated for industrial use, and the MSF could be there. Metrolinx should follow their own guiding policies and place it there. So if you do not believe in this assessment, could you please cover briefly, but in a straightforward way, your reasoning for this citing rather than what the members of the community who've asked this question are asking for?
Super, Joseph, and we expect this question, and it's been asked at multiple virtual open houses, and we're happy to go through our citing process. So the first thing that we did was we developed an approximate area that a maintenance and storage facility would need to have in order to operate properly for the Ontario line and have some expansion capability should the line get extended. Then we looked at every property between the exhibition and the Science Center and beyond, and we found 9 candidate sites that we then ran through an evaluation, a matrix evaluation, where we looked at the impacts to jobs and employment. We looked at the land area available. We looked at its proximity to the Ontario line. And what we did, as well as the cost associated with the work, the ability to relocate businesses. We wanted to make sure that any impacted businesses we could relocate. And then we also wanted to protect for houses, residential units, and make sure that any of the sites selected didn't impact existing residential units. We made it down to a short list of 3 sites. One of them was the Leaside Business Park on the west side of the CP corridor. The other one was the Wicksteed Industrial area, as well as the north of Overlea area. What we have ended up doing through consultation with our colleagues at the City of Toronto, as well as our Ontario Line technical advisors, was we ended up coming up with a hybrid or an option where we blended a little bit of the Wicksteed area and a little bit of the Overlea area into a solution that was both proximate to the Ontario Line. It was impacted the least number of jobs. And in fact, because so many of the jobs that are affected are relocatable, we have a very active employment relocation program in place where these businesses can relocate within Thorncliffe Park or to their place of choice. It may be more appropriate that they move outside of the neighborhood, and we've taken all those into account, and we're working quite closely with all those businesses to make sure that they're kept alive and are prosperous at the end of the day. So there was talk about transit-oriented communities. Well, every time we come to a station, we look at opportunities for transit-oriented communities to be developed there to create residential, commercial spaces to again create a prosperous environment. And all those things are at play in Thorncliffe Park as they are throughout the rest of the alignment. At the other stations where we're building and owning properties. So, that's the it's kind of a long and involved answer, but it was a very comprehensive site selection process. We are becoming very actively engaged with the communities to sense from them, what they would like to see happen in the community as a result of the transit coming in, and what we can help deliver as part of that transit build. Back to you, Joseph.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Malcolm. And obviously, there's a lot of thought and a lot of facts in this particular question that I didn't read out. And for people who are asking this question and making this case, if they wanted to make that into the process as part of this EIAR process between now and March 9th, how can they go the next step and make sure that their voice is actually on the record being heard and considered?
So James, maybe you can describe the process that we're collecting information on the EIAR and how we incorporate those comments and ideas into our environmental assessment.
Absolutely, yes. So as mentioned, right now we're in the public review period for the draft environmental impact assessment report that's open until March 9th. So very much encourage any comments that folks may have. One of the sections of the environmental impact assessment report is the project description. So we get into the siting decisions that have been made and the locations that we're at. And any comments we receive on any aspects of the environmental impact assessment report will be taking into consideration and responding to. They also become part of a public record that's included in our final impact assessment report, with all personal information removed, but the comments and our responses will be part of that final report. Would very much encourage any and all feedback on the environmental impact assessment report.
Okay, thank you for that. And James, I'm going to come to you with the next set of questions, but just because I know that there are a number of people who aren't used to participating in this, but may vote normally on up and down questions. And there's also a yellow button just below the Join Zoom button and above the Meet the Speakers that's on your screen. And the yellow button says comment on the draft environmental impact assessment report. And there is, if you go over to that page, you'll find the report and all of the appendices, plus you'll find some comment boxes where you can submit your comments and talk about the things that you are interested in, and that will go forward to the project team as part of this. So anybody can offer their comments through this process, and it's just one click away. So let's talk a bit about noise and vibration. And again, it's I think it's coming from Thorncliffe Park. And I'm going to run through some really specific questions for you, James. And the first one is that the report says that vibration levels are anticipated to be low and not cause structural damage. The question is, how many types of structures have been considered?
Okay, thanks, Joseph, and thank you for the question. So the noise and vibration assessment that's included in our environmental impact assessment report, it looks at all of the buildings and all of the structures near the project, and those are categorized into three different types. So three different types of structures. The first type is kind of typical buildings. The second type is heritage buildings or structures, and that's the type of building or structure that's typically most sensitive to vibration. And the third type is utilities or utility structures. And that statement that's referred to in the comment, that vibration levels are below levels of concern from a structural damage perspective, is accurate. That's very true for all three of those structures or types of structures, including the heritage structures.
Okay, thank you. So let's go a bit further. So the report also says that Metrolinx will develop a communications protocol for providing advance notice of construction work and addressing public complaints in a timely manner. So two questions out of that. Does that mean that the construction work will not proceed until the complaints have been addressed? And what's the definition of timely?
Great, thank you. Good questions. Great questions. So, in terms of our communications protocol as it relates to noise and vibration, so our goal here is to avoid complaints, and we're working to achieve that goal through proactive work. So we're proactively identifying and then implementing site-specific mitigation at our construction sites. We'll also be carrying out ongoing monitoring throughout construction, and that monitoring, it has an alert level, it'll have an action level, and that will be, both of those will be below kind of acceptable levels. So we'll be very responsive throughout construction if levels are starting to creep up. And we'll also be providing advance notification of nearby construction activity. So providing information about what work is coming, the timing of that work, and the anticipated duration of the work. To provide that advance notice. But if any issues do arise or complaints do come in, we endeavor to respond to those as quickly as we can. In terms of timeline, it depends on, I guess, the root cause of the issue. So if solving the issue might involve implementing additional mitigation, which might take us a few days to source and implement, it might take us a bit of time, but in every case, we'll be responding as quickly as we can. And if needed, we always have the ability to stop work if that's required to address the issue.
James,
And yes,
James, just in addition to that, we also set up community construction liaison committees where we explain to the local communities what we're going to be doing, and we look well in advance so that there are no surprises. And we make sure that we communicate the levels of noise that are going to be generated as a result of that work, once again, so that there's no surprises. So a very well orchestrated use of the Community Construction Liaison Committee can help us get information out into the community well in advance of the actual types of construction occurring, or if a tunnel boring machine is approaching a community, they will know well in advance what to expect. And we will have already run the tunnel boring machines for often many kilometers, so we'll understand what to be able to communicate to those community members. So it's a high level of engagement and sharing of information that will occur as a result of those meetings. Back to you, Joseph.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Again, I'm being very specific, but people have clearly voted for these, so they want to know about this. So sensitivity receptors. In your noise and vibration draft report, you talk about that during operations, the station's maintenance, storage facility, railway, and emergency exit buildings have the potential to generate noise at nearby sensitivity receptors. It's noted that these receptors would be placed in areas which would be, quotes, noise sensitive. How would you determine what specifically would constitute a noise sensitive area? Can you talk a bit about that, please?
Yes, absolutely. And this is a great question. It's diving into some of the specific language and some of the specific methods that we use in our assessment, and that comes to us from regulatory guidance and some industry practice. So we wanted to start with what some of that language that is used in the industry is. And so when we say receptor, what we mean is any location that could be impacted by noise or vibration, and it could be a person's house, could be a retirement home, could be a school. So that's kind of the definition of the receptor. I think that was the first question there, Joseph.
Yes, and how do you determine the noise sensitive area where they'll be placed?
Great. Okay, so what we did in terms of our study, we had our team first carry out a desktop mapping exercise. So they looked at all the land uses in the study area, and then they went out and walked the study area. So they walked it kind of tip to tail, and that field review, it confirmed that we had over 3,000 receptors in the study area. So those receptors, they were then grouped, and the nearest receptors to planned project construction or planned project operation were then selected for assessment. So that allowed our report to focus on a list of 260 of the most impacted locations. So we did a very detailed modeling assessment for each of those 260 modeled locations, and where each of those representative receptors, or the locations where we modeled our future vibration and noise levels, are listed, and they're shown within our noise and vibration report, which is on our website, and that list and the mapping of it is in Appendix E of that noise and vibration report. In some cases, so as I mentioned in the presentation, we did an assessment for construction noise and vibration. We also did an assessment for operational noise and vibration. And in some cases, the receptors are the same, and in other cases, they're distinct, depending on which impacts we anticipate for construction or for operation. But that's all shown within that appendix in the report, so folks can see if they're interested, for the portion of the study area they're most interested in, which receptors we've assessed in the report.
Okay, thank you. And there's a lot of it's a lot of report, a lot of details. I wonder if it's just possible to flag whether you could mention to your colleagues at Metrolinx that when they're answering the questions in writing, if they could just put the reference to the report, maybe with a link, so that somebody who comes and sees this could actually just link right over to the relevant section of the report so that they could find that.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Thanks, Rosie.
One final question for you, James, and that is, and again, it comes down to Thorncliffe Park. Are you able at this stage to talk about where specifically the receptors would be in Thorncliffe Park, and how far in advance of construction they'll be placed, and when the testing will be done?
Right, thanks, Joseph. So I think here there's a bit of a distinction between those receptors where we did our modeling and our predictions, and then locations for future monitoring. So we will be obtaining noise measurements right ahead of construction to make sure that we have a kind of up-to-date current picture of the noise environment right before construction. And our contractors will be doing that at each location where they're monitoring near construction sites for several days to establish that baseline. And then continuous monitoring throughout construction will be carried out at those locations. So those specific locations will be identified once we're a bit closer to construction start, and we've identified kind of construction sequencing and timing and all of that. And as Malcolm mentioned, as those details start to emerge, we'll be sharing that through our construction liaison committees. So that's information that's forthcoming, and we're just not yet at that stage. But as soon as that's available, we'll be sharing our plan.
Okay, thank you. Now, that was a lot of questions on one topic, but it's clearly a topic that a lot of people care about, and thank you for your answers. I'm going to ask one more of the written questions, and then we're going to go to the Zoom room, where I understand that Norando has many people who have put up their hands and would like to ask a question. So we're going to go over there after the next question. And again, if you'd like to join the Zoom room and put your hand up and ask a question, you can do that simply by clicking on the yellow Join Zoom button that's right below the video window in your browser. So the next question is the effect on wildlife. And it's from a resident of Minton Place who is referring to the fact that there's a large forested area there, and that there is a large herd of deer that live there and have lived there for quite some time. And essentially, the question is, what's going to happen to them during the construction period? How are you going to provide for that wildlife so that they are not impacted negatively by your activities?
Great, thank you. That's a great question. And as we commit to in the environmental impact assessment report, and in this case it's the natural environment report, we will be implementing best management practices for wildlife ahead of and during construction, and that includes putting up wildlife exclusion fencing so that wildlife are not inadvertently interacting with the construction site. We will be planning our work to adhere to what are known as timing windows, so wildlife timing windows. So each species or group of species has particularly sensitive periods during their seasonal cycles, and we plan our work to avoid works during those particularly sensitive periods. So that will be part of planning out our construction activities. And then we're also seeking to generally minimize impacts in this area. So as we're advancing our designs here, we're looking to have the most limited footprint that we can in the area to avoid impacts to the natural heritage system. And that includes looking at limiting tree removal. So we will need to remove some trees to accommodate safe construction, and we'll be planting many more trees for the trees that we do need to remove in this area. And that's in recognition of the ecosystem services those trees provide. But generally, we're seeking to reduce the footprint to the extent we can in this zone. And then once construction is, we will be restoring the areas back to pre-disturbance condition, and that's to make sure that the local wildlife like deer can continue to use the areas in the future.
Okay, and just sliding in as you were talking about it, James, construction areas can be pretty hectic, and by definition, things change through the construction process. Is there someone who would be responsible to monitor the impact on the wildlife during the actual construction and identify if something is happening that needs to be addressed?
Right. So we do require environmental inspectors out on our sites, and they are confirming adherence to all of the environmental requirements throughout construction. They are specialists in this, environmental construction site management, and able to help direct any mitigation efforts or any construction activities as may be needed to best manage our construction efforts.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Ed. You were really put on the spot. That wasn't planned. That's just the way the questions came up. And so let's go over to the Zoom room, because I know there are people with Norando who would like to ask their questions right now. Norando, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good night.
Over to you.
Right, so first up, we have Ramin. Ramin, you're unmuted. Please go ahead with your question.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Ramin Faraji here, one of the residents at Hopedale and Minton. And I want to start off by thanking the panelists for making this time for us. So, folks, I asked this question as someone whose life is about to turn upside down, and not only mine, but my family, for obvious reasons. And I'm a keen stakeholder in this process. I've been following every communication. I was here on Tuesday night, but patiently listening to all the questions and answered. I understand, even though I'm going to be negatively impacted by this, but I understand that these type of projects have to go on. This is bigger than me and my family, and this is for the greater good. So in light of that, and with that context, I hope you would appreciate my questions and provide answers that are expected of our technocrats, that are detailed and go beyond what is already communicated with us and get to the finer details. So I got two specific questions. Given the technology that you have proposed and the approach, both in construction and the operation, I'm talking about the rails, the trains, the fact that part of this line is going to be overground, some is going to be underground. Where have you seen the exact similar application of this, not exact, similar application of this technology where, again, part of it is overground, is underground, and has similar climate to us, that leads you to believe that your assessment of the sound, noise, and vibration that you forecast is, is going to be, in line with your forecast, and how much confidence you have in that. So that's question number one. Number two is, I have seen the plans and both the route and the proposed technology over the past year and a half. And I'm really curious, and I would like to ask you to point out maybe to 3 to 4 examples of the, changes that have taken place in the design of this proposed plan in light of the EIA. Because surely there are information that we didn't have before, and now that you have that information, how has that informed the future decision, the proposal that is being submitted right now? How have you taken this information, and what has changed since a year ago? Thank you for this opportunity.
Brandon, thank you very much. I'll start with some responses to the end of the question. So as the EIAR is developing, it's a constant feedback cycle, as I think you were alluding to, where issues are brought up to us, and we go through and we do a design exercise, or we do some modifications. So there's absolutely a continuous improvement cycle. I can list a few locations where we've made some changes. One of them was our traversing of the Don Valley over towards Thorncliffe Park. What we found there is that we had a slightly better alignment by being on the north side of Overlea rather than being down the center of Overlea, which is kind of the conventional way of building overland passageways, trainways. So that was one area. Also down near the exhibition, what we did was we smoothed out some corners there in order to help us with alignment through coming into King and Bathurst Station. That was one area. We also decided that it would be prudent to go to the northeast corner of Don Mills and Eglinton with that station because of a number of things. One was the connectivity to Line 5 was already established there. The proximity to the bus transfer station, as well the fact that we got across Eglinton during the initial build of the Ontario line. It means that further extension north is much easier for the next generation of subway builders that come behind us. So those were some of the continuous improvement that occurred. We've also done a lot of siting of our construction sites. We've moved a large number of them over out of the roadway. That is to improve the ability of the station, the timing of the station, the length of construction, as well as it keeps the road network active and moving. We've also looked at some forms of construction, which is called a sequential excavation method, which is a tunneling method, rather than doing very large open cuts in the downtown core. So those are just a handful of things that we've done to support the EIAR, improve construction, shorten schedule, all things that are ultimately beneficial to the communities that we're going to be building in. James, maybe you could just talk about the confidence in the noise modeling and in particular, some of the noise modeling that we've done through the joint corridor, which is a different area than we're talking about tonight. We've had 3 companies, 3 consultants looking at the noise modeling just to make sure that it's 100% right, that our mitigation is spot on, and that the commitments we're making are going to be achievable. James?
Absolutely, Malcolm. And that applies as well for the north segment. So in terms of various subject matter experts looking at the work, and as I mentioned earlier, one of the locations that we have in our immersive sound demonstration, it's nearly about to go live, is right at the top end of Minton Place, and that's a collaborative effort. We have noise experts at Stantec supporting that, and then the immersive sound demonstration is noise experts at AECOM who are who are also working with that data and working it through. So we have a variety of parties working on it. And in terms of the approach used, it's the Federal Transit Administration standard, and it's an industry standard used across North America for all areas, above ground, underground, transition zones, and including portals. And that's been used successfully throughout Canada and throughout the States over the last several decades. So it's well accepted and very familiar to our regulator. Our noise and vibration report and the modeling is also reviewed by our regulator actually ahead of publishing the draft. So it's been through, the modeling files themselves have been vetted by the regulator before we shared the results with you to make sure that they were also confident with the approach and the process and the results. So it's been through that, and just to specify, our regulator is the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks on this matter. They have noise specialists, noise subject matter experts in house, and they give us quite a detailed review as we advance our modeling and our work in this area. So all that to say, we are quite confident in the results, and that the model is robust and well designed for above ground, below ground, and transition zones as well.
And just in addition to that, Raman, if you have any follow-up questions about the Minton Place area, we do recognize that there's going to be a large construction site there, but it's not a launch site. It's an extraction site and the building of the portal to get out to the Don Valley. So it is much smaller by comparison to the tunneling operations that happen elsewhere. But that said, we've been in your community. We've met members of your community. If you have any questions, send us an email at ontarioline@metrolinx.com or give us a call. We'll answer your questions right away.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ramin. Next up, we have Mary. Mary, your device is unmuted. Please go ahead with your question.
Thanks very much. Mary Fragadak is here again with a bunch of different questions from 2 nights ago to Malcolm and the team. First up, will the bridge over the Don Valley be constructed on the valley floor or built at the work sites on either end of the bridge? And will this work on building the bridge be concurrent with tunneling activities, or are there going to be 2 sets of noise, traffic, pollution, and vibrations from tunneling and bridge work? And lastly, given recent examples of subsidence, i.e. sinkholes and other forms of ground collapse on other projects in Ontario, how will you measure and protect houses and businesses on the route from structural damage to property? And I don't mean noise and vibration.
Yeah, no, I understand that, Mary. Nice to hear from you again tonight. So we'll tackle this in a number of different buckets. We'll deal with the monitoring for damage to buildings through the tunneling process or the shoring process or that. So what we do is we identify areas that are buildings within an influence zone, and we do precondition surveys of those buildings to make sure that if there was any damage, that we would fully understand it and be able to do proper repairs. But in our project output specifications, which are the rules that the contractor must build by, there are very strict settlement criteria that we include. And those are specifically to make sure that the buildings adjacent to them are not damaged. As for our tunneling operations, those are very deep. Those are very deep, or they're underneath, under roadways at times. So we're quite confident, that the tunneling operations that we're going to be executing are such that there will be no subsidence. And then at our last meeting, Richard described a method of GPS satellite measurements that we're taking currently, and we're doing that across the entire alignment in all 4 seasons, so that we get the seasonal changes logged, and we'll be able to pretty much live monitor anything that's happening across the areas where we're doing work and where we might be expecting a tunnel boring machine to be operating. We're also using the latest technology for these tunnel boring machines. They're called earth pressure tunnel boring machines. And what that does is it provides a pressurized area at the front of the cutter face, so that the ground is not allowed to settle into that cutter face as it moves forward. It's really important to have, especially in soft soils. Downtown, when we're in shale, it's much less important. And Richard, did you want to add anything else about the construction monitoring that we do as part of our program and obviously our construction liaison committees?
Yeah, well, there is that, but I mean, in addition to the satellite monitoring, which is quite sensitive to the ground surface and any movement of the ground surface or in the roads or the sidewalks or anything like that, it also monitors all the buildings as well, and it's a very sensitive system. It'll pick up those differences, and not quite real time, very very close to, and we have monitoring and alert levels that it provides us in terms of anything that might be happening. I think the other item you asked about was the portal and bridge construction and extraction. I think the exact coincidence of those, I mean, there's probably some overlap between those in terms of the construction schedule. The actual construction schedule will be developed with the contractor. But essentially, the bridge itself is anticipated to be what they call a balanced cantilever bridge. So essentially, it starts from a pier in the middle, and they build out like this from the center of the pier using concrete. It's likely to be a concrete structure. Although that's our reference concept design. We haven't received the final proposals from the proponents. And then the portal itself, as you know, is right at the end of Minton Place, out over in the slope there, going out over the Don Valley.
Sorry, so are you doing the work then from the valley floor?
Yeah, so the bridge piers would be erected from the valley floor up, and then you'd cantilever out from the bridge piers.
Okay, because I wondered about your map, because you don't have a big footprint where I can't make sense of your footprint because I can't see if you're because you're over the Richmond Hill line in some instances. So I was trying to make sense of like where you're staging all of your work. So you're going to build out. Do you know how many piers there are going to be?
Sorry, what was that?
How many piers are there going to be? Because so that the struct, like how far apart are they going to be between? I mean, I see you've made the quickest line and straightest line from Minton Place to Thorncliffe on the west side of the current Leaside Bridge. So I'm just wondering how many feet are you going to have piers?
They're quite far apart because, surprisingly enough, there's a lot of stuff in the Don Valley. So my recollection, and I could be wrong, but I think it's 5, I think, across there. 5 piers in total. And they're quite far apart, like over 50 meters between them. 50 to 70 meters. 4. I've just been told 4.
Oh, 4 piers.
And James, let me know they're actually on the EIAR.
Yes, they're in the. Yeah, if it just so we show indicative pier locations in the mapping in the draft EIAR. So in the our executive summary of the main report, and then also in its section 3, the project description. So it's still indicatively shown, but it's 4 main piers in the valley.
Okay, I mean, I have more questions, and I will come back at you again. So not tonight. Well, to be continued. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mary.
Right. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Next up, we have Rosemary. Rosemary, you're unmuted. Please go ahead with your question.
Thank you very much for taking my question. I am really concerned about the Gerard and Carlaw intersection. Your diagrams show the two bridges now are going to cover that entire intersection. It's a massive staging area, and I think we need a lot more information about how you're going to do traffic management there. You know, I'm sure you're aware there is a fire station right at that corner. You know, traffic has to move there. I'm worried about the businesses that are going to be desperately affected. And also there's a park at that corner. It's a dog park. Your previous information showed that you were going to have a replacement park, which is very important for our community. I don't see that in the most recent information that you're publishing. So please talk a little bit more about that. You know, you're building a station there on bridges. I'm worried you're really going to make it impossible to move in the neighborhood for years, and especially about the safety given the fire station. So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. Number of good questions. I'll deal with the dog park first. So yes, in order for us to construct the Gerard station, we are going to be occupying the existing dog park. We're working quite closely with Toronto Parks and Forestry to identify an alternative off-leash area for dogs that could be temporary or permanent, you know, as they see fit. Through that area, we're also purchasing some land. So when we're done, the project and the Ontario line opens, that Carlaw Dog Park is actually going to be larger in size because of the extra properties that we're bringing to it, and we'll be working quite closely with the community and the City of Toronto to program those spaces so that when we leave, they're looking good and they have the well-suited uses that the community would like to see. Richard, maybe you just want to talk a little bit about the bridge construction in the area so that we can, and obviously the staging out of the tunnel boring machine launch.
Yeah, so the on the north side there, it's the where the No Frills Plaza is where the launch shaft is for the tunnel boring machine, and the staging areas there for the tunnel liners and spoil removal. The bridges that go across there, Gerard Carlaw, there's existing GO Bridge, which will remain, and then there is there's some bridges to the Ontario line bridges to the west of there, and it is a long span bridge that basically is partly the station itself, actually, kind of, and that leads into the portal as the line goes underground and it curves to the north. The work is actually being planned to be staged and supported from the dog park, as Malcolm mentioned, and there's also some additional adjoining land that we're purchasing, and that'll be combined together to make the construction site, and then afterwards that'll be returned to upgraded park space for the community. Upgraded and expanded. It'll be quite a bit bigger than it is currently.
So we also do prepare, as part of our construction program, a traffic management program, which will absolutely take into account the emergency services, fire department sites, and the ability to get in and out at all times. That's just, without a doubt, one of the most important things that we can be doing. It also accounts for how we get our trucks and our vehicles and our materials in and out of the site. So it's a very comprehensive document. We will, as we've been talking about previously, set up a community construction liaison committee so that everybody's well informed about what's happening. Our interface and engagement with the City of Toronto, we are constantly having reviews done with them, by them, with regard to traffic management and their traffic management services. So, it's quite a coordinated effort, because there's a lot of other construction projects happening in Toronto, not just the Ontario. Back to the Zoom room.
Thank you for your question, Rosemary. Next up, we have Shelley. Shelley, your device
Hi.
is unmuted. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me, everybody? Thanks everyone for being here tonight. I'd first like to express I'm getting some text messages from people who are on this call tonight who are very frustrated because we have about 10 minutes left and nobody feels like you are getting to their questions. I would like to ask the team here that you can stay and answer everyone's question this evening, seeing as how this is the last chance for people on this section of the line to get any kind of answer or question that they want to you from a 3,000-page report. So I think it's only fair to either do more of these and or to do them longer so that people have a chance to speak to you. So I'm going to put that out there, and then I'm going to quickly get to my question. Having now read about 8,000 pages of environmental assessments reports from Metrolinx and your contractors, the ECR, the EWR, and the IAR, I can say without a doubt, as someone who lives in Riverside and Leslieville, that this line belongs underground. And this report, the IAR, only cements my feeling that the impacts, especially around the Girard Station area at Riverdale Plaza, are shocking. So if you don't know, there's a portal there for people who don't know that, and it will be the tunnel boring site. It's the only extraction site that's going to be pulling soil and materials, will all be stored there. And if you don't know this area, it is a very quiet, small corner of our city, and it's a low-rise area except for a tower, the Francis Beavis Tower, that is a senior citizens home, which towers right over the portal. And just across kitty corner from this portal is the Pape Avenue Junior School. So our community is very concerned about this tunnel boring machine staging area, which will be a massive staging area in the heart of this very small area. It's also getting to one brand new bridge, and it's going to be sort of a massive undertaking. So I'm looking at this table, which is called, from your noise and vibration report, it's called the mitigated noise levels at this corner of Girard Station. I'm looking at these levels, which are mitigated, and I see the tunneling day and night activity is sitting at 82 decibels. Your decibel level for this corridor during the day is 80, and at night it's 70. And here you are sitting at 82 right next to the seniors' home and the school. And I look down at the lowest level in this area is 71. So you are over these your own decibel levels that are mitigated. So my question is, what mitigations did you use to arrive at this modeling? And what further mitigations are you going to plan to get these decibel levels down for these vulnerable populations? But also, how long do you predict that you are going to need this staging area? And how long will it take to tunnel up from Girard to the Don Valley? When is this site starting and when is it going away? Thank you.
Okay, so let's unpack a few of those things, Shelley. First off, we often monitor the number of people in the Zoom room, and we often extend these meetings. So as we get closer to the end, we'll certainly be looking at that. And the next question is the noise mitigation of the operations there. Well, we're looking at this across the entire alignment, and We do have other means and methods that we can implement to protect and reduce noise. Some of that Richard described at the last meeting.
That were mitigated? What did you model with? It's not in the report.
Okay, I'll let James answer that.
Yeah, so Shelley, I think if you look above the table within that same section, we spell out what mitigation was included in that modeling. And so I think one item to keep in mind, as mentioned during the presentation, is that we use conservative assumptions for construction noise and vibration assessment. So we assumed full power equipment, a whole host of equipment running at the same time at full power and at every location within the construction zones, which is a conservative overestimate of how we think construction might work, but we're at an early stage, and so we're taking that approach. We then, in terms of mitigation that we brought in that mitigated scenario, we assumed a 5-meter tall barrier around the site. We assumed using enclosures around some of the equipment, and that's all spelled out. And you're right, at some of those locations we do show that we're above our target level, and the report indicates that tells us we need to take a closer look at this as we're approaching construction, and we commit to doing that. So as Malcolm was saying, there are other measures we can take, and that will really hinge on our contractors' selected means and methods, and we'll be working very closely with them and sharing the results with the community as we're getting closer to construction and identifying our specific management approaches.
So that's where I was going. Also, Shelley, was that there are other locations throughout the alignment where the noise of construction we are anticipating in an unmitigated environment might be higher than our current standards. So we're going about this is continuous feedback cycle for us to be able to lower those sound readings in our project-specific output specifications, so that when the contractor designs them and operates, that they will be compliant with the rules that we're setting out. With respect to the schedule for the tunnel boring machines, that's in the north contract, and that construction is going to be happening in starting in 2024. Richard, do we have about 2 years of construction, tunnel construction, to get up to the Minton portal?
Yeah, I mean, typically the first thing that happens is they construct the what they call the launch shaft, which is basically where the portal will be in the future, and that typically takes probably 9 months or so. Obviously, this is all subject to the exact schedule we get from the contractor, but I would say allow 9 months approximately. The tunnel boring machine themselves, once that shaft is completed, it takes about 3 months to assemble them and commission them, so call that a year in total. And then the actual running of the machine takes, they move forward at a rate between 10 and 15 meters a day. It's about, the tunnels are about 2.6 kilometers long, so it takes about 200 days to actually excavate the tunnel itself. And at that point, they're removed from the north end, as you say, at Minton Place, and the portal is completed. So yeah, you're a couple of years.
Back to the Zoom room.
All right, thanks, Shelley. Next up, we have Brad. Brad, your device is unmuted. Please go ahead with your question.
Thanks, everyone, for taking my question. I live on Hazelwood Avenue, which is just south of Pape and Danforth. And several of my neighbors have the tunnel going, both tunnels going under their houses directly. Houses that were built in the 1920s. One thing I couldn't find in the EA document was reference to the depth of the tunnel at that location. There was no profile that I could find or text talking about depth. And I'm asking for the depth to the top of the tunnel. My other question is, with respect to post-construction, expected post-construction noise levels. If perceptible levels are measured in someone's basement, for example, by your definition of perceptible, what reactive measures are available to you post-construction, and what are your commitments to actually implementing those reactive measures? Thanks.
So Brad, another bunch of good questions. Running underneath the houses, we're about 30 meters deep at Pape Station, and that is very deep. We're quite confident that the noise and vibration mitigation measures that are being implemented, in addition to the tunnel depth and the technology that we have, will have negligible noise transmission to the basements. As James has indicated, we're setting up the sound room to be able to demonstrate what the impact is. If we find that there is noise generated in the basements, it's usually the result of something poorly done from a maintenance point of view. It could be a wheel flat. It could be a piece of equipment that isn't quite aligned, and those sort of things. We know exactly where when and where the noise is being transmitted to. We know whether a train's passing that area because everything's fully automated. And without a doubt, if there was noise being generated in your neighbor's basement or your basement, a simple call to Metrolinx, we would be out there and we would be investigating, number one, what the noise is, and would be taking noise measurements in your basement to identify what might be causing the noise. There's always things available to us that we can add. Wheel lubrication quiets the train running, and we would only do that if there was a need for it. So there are a large number of mitigations available. As for your neighbors' properties, Vicky can talk to the property discussions that will occur. Specifically, your neighbors should call Vicky's team at the number that we provided earlier, which was 416-202-5150. If they have any questions. Vicky, did you just want to talk about the easement underneath homes for tunnels?
Sure, not a problem, Malcolm. So this relates a little bit back to when I was referring to compensation and taking a look at that. And we're really just at the beginning of our acquisition process, but we'll definitely be taking that fulsome look of what is the fair market value of your property and what it is that we are doing on that property. So do not hesitate to reach out. You might have been chatting with us already, but if not, definitely reach out to us. We'll look at your specific property and what that means exactly in terms of that subsurface requirements. Back to you, Malcolm, Joseph. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Next up, we have Athavin. I hope I got your name correct. Your device is unmuted. Please go ahead with your question.
For sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the panel for answering our questions tonight and taking the time to talk to us today. So the first question answered in tonight's panel was actually my question regarding the operations, storage, maintenance, and facility site that's supposed to be sited for Thorncliffe Park. And I just have a few thoughts and rebuttal and about your process in choosing this site selection and the whole point of this environmental impact assessment report. You mentioned it's supposed to be a feedback loop, right? You're supposed to take information from your assessment and use that to inform your decisions. In your socioeconomic and land use characteristics assessment of the draft EIAR, you mention a lot of demographics in the Thorncliffe area, such as you mentioned that 2/3 of the population are recent immigrants. Many of the residents have not completed secondary, post-secondary education. It is the lowest earning neighborhood in the Ontario Line North segment, and less than 50% of the population is employed. This area was a community made to serve 10,000 residents, and it's now serving over 30,000 residents. This is a population density of more than 10,000 people per square kilometer. And your guiding policies and planning policies, and I'm quoting word for word here, in your provincial policy statement, healthy and active communities by facilitating active transport and community connectivity. The provincial A Place to Grow growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, designed to promote economic growth, increase housing supply, create jobs, and build communities to make life easier, healthier, and more affordable for people of all ages. This community has the largest primary school in North America. This community has one of the largest youth populations in the city. And so Thorncliffe Park is, knowing these demographics, Thorncliffe Park is not the right site for the OSMF. You're taking away 1/3 of the land that was cited for this community for this maintenance facility that was originally supposed to be put in Leaside Business Park. Yet due to the Leaside Business Association and councillors, Toronto councillors coming together to vote to have the facility moved out of their community, is now been chosen to be put on Thorncliffe Park on the other side of the tracks. You coming up with all these, you made these roundabout kind of answers about the site selection, right? But I want to ask Metrolinx as an organization, knowing understanding that public transit is important for the growth of our community. It's important in fighting climate change and for the proper green transition that we need to see within our communities. Yet Canada has a history of Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities facing the brunt of the impact from these environmental, from these processes, whether it's refineries, landfills. And now Metrolinx has a history of doing this with the Jane and Finch community, the Eglinton community, and now Thorncliffe Park community is the next one on your list. So I'm asking a very moral question, and looking back at your own environmental impact assessment report and understanding these demographics, understanding this community and how it will be affected by this decision, this very short-sighted decision, how are you going to move forward? And this process is supposed to be a feedback process, right? Knowing these things, how can you still move forward with this OMFSF site? How can you put this train yard in this community where it shouldn't belong, right? And your own planning policies line out and tell you exactly word for word what you should be doing. This is the exact type of community that should be benefiting from transit, right? You should be building employment opportunities around them. You talk about the Leaside Business Park being an area where there will be a loss of jobs, where there's more than 30,000 people living in this community whose voices you haven't heard because your own process has, if you actually look at the type of people, the interested parties you mentioned that Metrolinx has consulted with, are limited to property owners, business owners, government ministries, conservation authorities and municipalities, and Indigenous communities. It has no regard to permanent renting communities like Thorncliffe Park. So these communities and residents have not been heard. And the people sitting with you at the table receiving benefits regarding this are business owners and property owners that don't represent the people who actually live there. And you failed in that consultation process. You failed in really representing and being able to help this green transition in a positive way that's not going to have Black, Brown, and Indigenous people bearing that impact. And I want to know, just clearly, knowing these things in your own report, in these own findings that you found as Metrolinx, can you as an organization say, this is the right moral decision to make? To place this OMFS site in a community where there are thousands of youth, children, who are expected to grow in a community and city where housing has become more and more inaccessible. To be able to, how are they expected to grow, get jobs, if a third of their community space is being taken up by this facility? Can Metrolinx stand by and say, yes, this is the right thing to do, and let this community bear the brunt of this impact? Or will they do the right thing and say, we will move this OMFS site and we will support this community to grow in a positive way? Because this is actually kind of sickening, because you know all these facts. They're in your document. You should be able to connect the dots and be like, hey, this isn't the right thing to do. So I just want to hear from you guys, just a clear answer. What are you going to do concerning this issue? And how are you going to and really the OMFS as such site shouldn't be there. So how are you going to move forward with this issue? Because clearly it is a very loaded issue and should be taken very seriously, instead of being given the same roundabout answers about the site selection.
Afaven, thank you for your question and challenge. No single project is going to deliver everything to the community. This is a transit project that we're delivering, but it does more than that. But it may not do everything. And I did describe earlier in our meeting a site selection process that went end to end for the Ontario line. I talked about, one of the most important things that I've heard from the Thorncliffe Park community is about jobs. And without a doubt, the plan that we have put together maintains and has the least impact to jobs. And in Thorncliffe Park, with a successful mobilization and reorganization of the businesses that are in the park to new locations that we're currently negotiating for and preparing for, will actually, at the end of the day, provide job opportunities, because there's over 200 jobs in the MSF. Transit in and of itself coming into Thorncliffe Park is going to create a level of connectivity to jobs, opportunities, both inside and outside of the community. So that in and of itself are all positive outcomes. We do want to create community benefits as part of our implementation of the Ontario line, and those take the form of better community spaces that are made available because we're rebuilding the north side of Overlea. We can create that Main Street environment that people want to be hanging out in and enjoying. And along with that comes the opportunity for redevelopment. And when that happens, it provides some more commercial space. It allows businesses that can operate in the community and be successful there to actually grow and flourish. There's a whole discussion that's going to be happening with the lands that are not used by transit with the City of Toronto around what those will look like. But this is a long-term investment that the province is making, and it is ultimately an investment in the community, because the solutions that are being developed right now at Metrolinx are building transit all the way to the Science Center. With the old designs that the Relief Line South was, we were only going to go as far as PAPE, with hopes that future funding might arrive and allow us to go further north. But that wasn't promised. This is today. We're going to get to Flemington Park. We're going to get to Thorncliffe Park. We're going to get down to Liberty Village, which were all areas that were poorly served by transit. And transit is a vehicle to be able to improve lifestyles. And just the building of the Ontario line is going to create jobs for the next 8 to 10 years. And those are jobs that your community can participate in. So, it's, we have very active discussions going on with various business leaders and union leaders to have exactly that, the opportunities for people to participate at various levels in the construction process. So, I don't think you adequately described the future of Thorncliffe Park. It is not going to be, as you describe, an area that is unusable. It is going to be an area that is very usable and very suited to the community in which it's built. Back to the Zoom room.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. Caitlin taking over here. So next up we have Tracy. Tracy, you can go ahead and ask your question. And just a reminder to all to please be brief and get to your question as best as possible so that we have time to respond to everyone. And we'll keep running until 8:30. Thank you. Go ahead, Tracy.
Thank you. Thanks for having the meeting and taking the questions. I've got a two-parter. One, I know that the environmental assessment is being run by the governance that's set out by the province of Ontario. So my first question is, given that the guidelines for preparing and reviewing environmental assessments actually states that a minimum of 5 weeks should be provided for the inspection of draft documents, and for large-scale undertakings or ones where there's a great interest, which this particular project, I believe, does have a fair bit of interest, and given the volume of materials that are included in this, why do we have less than 5 weeks, and why are we not being provided more? And then in reviewing the assessment, there's multiple references all over the place with respect to mitigation plans. So when will those mitigation plans be fleshed out, shared with community stakeholders, and how will the community stakeholders be able to ensure that those particular plans are being met with some type of simplified traceability matrix?
Thanks, Tracy, for the question. So for the first one, I think you're referring to the code of practice put out by the Ministry of Environment for preparing and reviewing environmental assessments in Ontario, and that's kind of a general document. For transit projects, we have specific environmental processes that we follow, and the longer established process for transit projects is the transit project assessment process. It has its own guide and its own process, and that features a 30-day public review period for the final environmental assessment report. It's a regulated timeline for the Ontario Line environmental assessment process. We similarly have a regulated timeline. At least from my perspective, there's some enhanced consultation and documentation in this Ontario Line environmental assessment process. So we publish not only a final report, which is the requirement for the transit project assessment process, we also publish a draft. So the draft is what we've now published. It's under that 30-day public review, and following that, we'll be updating the report, responding to comments, and publishing a final. So we are required to meet our regulatory timelines that are spelled out in a project-specific regulation, and the approach we're taking is aligned with the approach taken for other transit projects across the province in terms of review periods. And then in terms of mitigation plans, so we are absolutely very specific about our mitigation solutions when the details that we need to inform that are known. And a good example of that is the vibration isolation solutions. So we're committed to those. We've spelled those out in the report. When it comes to specific construction methods and approaches that will be determined once design is further along, and specific construction activities and means and methods are identified, then that's at the point where the specifics will be there. So the environmental impact assessment report identifies elements that will be in those plans, but the details are forthcoming, and so the mitigation details that respond to the project details will be available at a later time.
Thanks very much.
Back to the Zoom room.
Thanks, Malcolm. And next up, we have Karen. Karen, you can go ahead. You are unmuted.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for taking this time. It's been a long night. So I have a couple of questions. I have a first one that's a little bit longer, and then a shorter one. So if you'll just hear me out. So in the EIAR, and this is around noise and vibration, just for everyone's point of reference. So you've provided a chart on page 107, and it provides data around your terrain day, night, the existing levels, and then you have your day and night levels, and then you have a train L pass by decibel level. So you have the existing levels for Hopedale would be 56. Our existing is 55 and 50, which adhere to recommended guidelines. Then you have a day-night for train at 60 for during the day and 55 at night. And then you have a train pass by at 64. And I know that your high, or I guess it would be your level of 80 decibels. So therefore you meet compliance. So this goes through from different points in different residences. But it's also noted in your EIAR that there will be a sound pressure of 4 decibels, louder 25 meters from the portals on either side of the bridge. So given that we are in a valley, sound carries, and in your report, there's also going to be approximately 1,000 trains traveling over the bridge at a given time. So first question, around the 64 decibel levels, how was that arrived? So, where did you determine that, and where did that modeling come from? The second one is how will Metrolinx ensure that the noise levels stay at the recommended guidelines by the World Health Organization and by the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change to 55 and 50 day and night respectively? So within that, what sort of mitigation measures do you plan or you endeavor to implement to ensure that these noise levels will stay below what is acceptable levels?
Thank you. Thanks for the detailed questions, and thank you also for the page reference. It's really handy to know we're looking at the same table. So for the first question, in terms of where did that 64 decibel number come from? So we model noise in a few different ways, and we look at it from different lenses, different perspectives, and that's to make sure that we're meeting all of our regulatory requirements in this area. So one of the requirements that is imposed by the province is a pass-by level, and so that's the noise of a single train going by, and we've modeled that based on how quiet the Ontario Line trains will be, and that table presents what that level will sound like at all of the various representative receptor locations we assessed in the report. So that 64 decibel level, that will be the sound level at that location, and that is similar to the sound of a normal conversation. So that's a kind of conversational level happening in the same room that you're in. So that's just for a bit of context there. And in terms of making sure that our noise is staying within guideline levels and what mitigation levels are there. So what we do is we look at what the existing noise environment is, and that typically provides our target where the existing environment is very, very quiet. The Ministry of Environment, which is our regulator on this topic, tells us we have to meet a target of an average noise level over the daytime of 55 decibels and an average noise level in the nighttime of 50 decibels. So at most locations in urban areas, the existing noise level is higher than those levels, and it just so happens by it's quite coincidental, but here that is kind of the existing noise levels, and so that's what we target. We are provided for each project. We're provided an allowance because there's a recognition that infrastructure does generate some noise. Our target is to have that be as quiet as possible. And so because Ontario line trains are so quiet that passage of a train going by, it's similar to existing noise. There's the average noise of all the trains going by in daytime is 56 decibels, and at nighttime it's 51. So it's a very marginal difference, which is not considered to be really noticeable. So it will be very similar to the existing noise environment, and the immersive sound demonstration that we're just about to launch has a location right at the top of Minton Place, and that will help really, I think, visualize what the future environment will sound like. So I'd really encourage a review of the sound demonstration. It kind of brings the numbers to life and makes it a bit more real. So with that, Caitlin, if I think I answered both questions, Caitlin, I'd pass it back to the Zoom room.
Perfect. Thank you very much, James. And we have two questions left this evening. One is a written question that I will leave until the end. So Susan, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, and you can ask your question.
Thank you so much. So I just have, well, two sort of quick questions. The first one is to do with, Malcolm, you mentioned tonight the community construction liaison committees. Are those have not been formed yet? When do you anticipate forming those?
Yeah, so we up in the north, that construction's not happening until 2023. So the ones in the south we have to get up and running right away. But the Community Construction Liaison Committee also serves as a good sounding board for us when we're doing virtual open houses and things like that. So we can talk about the things that are important to the community. So, our goal is to get those up and running this year, right across the entire alignment, so that we can start getting a better engagement, a better feedback, and start producing materials that the community wants to talk about. There's also a community engagement aspect with regards to some of the areas, like we have a community group set up in the joint corridor area, where we're talking about some of the designs and what we can do in that area to do the noise walls and the retaining walls and the landscaping adjacent to it. So those things are all getting set up. I would say by the end of the year for the north at the latest, maybe even in the summer. Back to you, Caitlin.
Oh, sorry. I think I had one follow-up. it was to do with the, again, back to Thorncliffe Park. We recognize, of course, that environmentally it's best for all, and especially kids, to have access to green space. And the fact that the proposed MSF is going to be taking up a third of the land of the neighborhood. What are you going to do to bring some green space or some benefits in that line to people living in the community? And also, I know that you have provided funds to the IST for more recreational space. Can you confirm that that community space will actually be a community space and not just reserved for the members of the IST?
Okay, so a couple of things. So yeah, a very active engagement on creating community spaces. In addition to the relocation of the IST from 4 Thorncliffe Park to 20 Overley are ongoing. And you know, that's the sort of valuable interface that we would like to have with the community, so that we can understand what the community needs, what the community wants, and then through transit we can implement some things, we can help instigate other things. So we are certainly collaborating with other ministries. We're collaborating with the City of Toronto. So I can say that there are plans for some additional green spaces, some additional animated spaces, program spaces below the guideways, to create a Main Street type environment. You know, currently in Thorncliffe Park, in the area that we're occupying, right now it's all developed. So there isn't a lot of green space. So you know, we will be increasing the amount of green space in the area as a result of the transit build, and then more opportunities to give back to the community through the other programs that are running alongside the transit delivery. You asked specifically about IST and whether it's specific to their membership. We've been told that no, it's not. It's open for others to use. Anytime I've been there, I've been very welcomed and invited. So I have sensed the good nature of the leadership of the IST to welcoming others from different parts of different communities. Back to you, Caitlin.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Malcolm. And I have received a message that our final questioner, Amir, would like to ask his question himself. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. And please go ahead, Amir.
Hey, Malcolm. A lot of questions. I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible. I know it's late. So which community organizations with a history of serving Thorncliffe Park is Metrolinx engaging regarding community benefits? Who's going to make sure that originally what you said was 600 jobs, now you're saying 200 jobs? Who's going to make sure that those 200 jobs go to people living in our community? And like, let's make a promise here and now that that's going to happen, because you guys didn't do a job in Black Creek or in Jane and Finch. And I'm not talking about changing winter mats or window washing. I'm talking about real career jobs. And like, explain to us how 200 jobs created by the OMSF, not promised to the community yet, is better than having that space used for workforce development to prepare the thousands of children and youth that will need jobs in the coming years in our community. Thank you.
Hi, Amir. Nice chatting with you. I haven't talked yet this year, so yeah, no. I every time we've spoken, we've heard quite clearly the importance of employment to the community, and you know, active engagement in the community. So we do have goals through the other ministries that are working alongside with the Ministry of Transportation to have career opportunities and training opportunities all brought to the Thorncliffe Park communities, as well as other communities throughout the alignment. I can't sit here and promise you today that every job's going to go to somebody from Thorncliffe Park. That wouldn't be reasonable, and I don't think you would expect me to say that. But there are opportunities, and that's the reality of it. And we talked about the job training, which you were involved with earlier, and we're looking for spaces. And those are the sort of discussions that we can help facilitate. We're absolutely going to make linkages and connections to other government programs as part of the delivery of transit, and we will do everything within our ability and power and mandate to have an improved Thorncliffe Park as a result of the transit coming in here, and in and of itself giving opportunity to get to jobs. Even outside of the transit build and outside of the maintenance and storage facility, so that the community can have better access to work. And I think that's all really important. And I know we've talked about this. It was one of the positive things about transit coming to Thorncliffe Park is those linkages, and those are coming. And hopefully they will yield great results in Thorncliffe Park. Back to you, Caitlin.
And Caitlin, I think that you said that was the last of the Zoom questions, and thank you so much for jumping in and making it possible that we could get all of those extra questions. So we're almost at 25 to 9. We've gone for a long time tonight. I hope that everybody who asked a question and was participating feels that you have been listened to. I just want to say, as the moderator, I have been so impressed with the thoughtfulness of the questions and the civil tone. It makes it possible, and we're really mindful in this day and age, it makes it possible to actually express our views and to know that we're being listened to. The comment was also made about where we are in the process and that this was the last chance. I just want to emphasize that there is a button, comment on the draft environmental assessment report. You can go there. Many of you have input your views as well as asking questions on this page. There is the opportunity for you to submit your comments so that they can be taken into account. And please do that and add the extra information. So you will also be able to see the recording of tonight's meeting as well as the meeting the other day if you come back here. And thank you, everyone, for participating tonight in this session. It's one of many. It's part of a process, and it is an important part of the process. So until our next meeting, thank you and stay safe.